Hi there. I've been working on this song in Ableton Live, and I wanted to show you some of the features I've been using in the project. As I've worked through this, what I've noticed is that I've really used audio effects to make the tracks interact with each other in kind of an interesting way. And this is something that kind of happens naturally in live performances. If I'm playing bass with a drummer, I'm listening to that other musician and kind of responding to him in real time. And that interaction is really noticed by the audience. It brings the kind of cohesion to the music and makes it feel like everyone's kind of playing together. When you're building a tune in a DAW like Ableton Live, you have to put that kind of interaction in there yourself, and it can be kind of difficult. The best way to do it is just to compose the parts in a way that really do respond to each other, but after that we can use audio effects to make the tracks kind of respond to each other automatically in an interesting way. Sidechain compression is the most common way to do this, but there are a bunch of different ways that we can make the tracks interact, and I'd like to show you a bunch in this kind of 5-part series. So in this one, I'll look at sidechain compression, particularly with my two bass parts, and some really specifics about the routing points I've used, and some kind of specifics in the compressor and how we adjust the pumping sound. So let's check out just the two bass parts and see how they do sound together, and then we'll kind of dissect it and see the specifics of the parts. So there's two bass parts. Here we have an acoustic bass part. I like how punchy it is. And then a synth bass part. Now, if I disable the effects, let's see what that synth bass part sounds like. Much more static. In fact, if we were to look at the waveform, we'll see pretty much just solid bars, right? It really doesn't have any dynamics to it. Now, I felt like my electric bass performance was nice and punchy. I liked how it has that nice attack with the beat. But the synth bass is kind of soft attack, but has a really cool evolution in that it brings that wobble in toward the end of the note. So I like to incorporate these two things in a natural way. I did that by adding a compressor to the synth bass part. When you first open compressor, you won't see the sidechain section. You'll have to open up this triangle here, and it exposes the sidechain section. We can enable the sidechain input, and a compressor, it's a pretty simple effect. It just says when the volume gets above a certain threshold, which we set right here, lower the volume automatically. Usually, a compressor is listening to the same signal that it's compressing, right? If a bass gets too loud, it lowers the bass. We can kind of separate the listening portion of the compressor to the volume change portion of the compressor. I enable the sidechain to say, listen to another signal. And in this case, I chose bass, and then we'll get to this post-effect setting in a moment. And then it's going to compress the synth bass. So every time it hears the bass hit hard, it brings the volume down of the synth bass. Now, the great thing about Ableton Live is that we do have multiple routing points that we can choose. Usually, you might just choose post-mixer, and that would be kind of after the volume fader and the pan knob and the mute button. But in this instance, I chose post effects, which is pre-mixer, meaning that no matter what the volume fader is for the bass track or the mute button is for the bass track, we'll still hear that pumping, which is kind of a neat effect. Let's hear it in action. So you can kind of see the 2 meters, and you can see how this bass is now pumping, going down in volume every time this hits. It's an interesting sound. Now, what if I was to go from audio from, leave it as bass, but choose post mixer? Now, because this one's muted, we just get a solid tone. If I unmute the first track, we'll start getting that pumping. And if I reduce the volume of the first track, we don't have the pumping. As I bring this up, we get this kind of automatic mix. Now, this great feature of this is we can choose either one, and it's kind of unique to Live that you have this opportunity. So please, play with sidechain compression and really consider those specific routing points. Do you choose post-mixer, which means the volume of the first one will control this, how this is pumped, or do you choose post-effects, which again is pre-mixer, which means no matter where this is, the synth bass can still pump. Now the post effects routing point is really useful because I can mute this bass track and still hear the pumping. That allows me to have kind of ghost tracks, maybe a ghost kick, a kick that really you don't hear. We've muted the track, but can still control the compressors on the other tracks. Great feature, check it out. When you are sidechain compressing, remember that your release parameter is hugely important. That controls how fast that compressor comes back up and kind of controls the speed of the compression. And your threshold and ratio, really important. Threshold, when it starts compressing, ratio, how much it compresses. Next week, we'll look at auto filter and see how that can be used in a similar way to create kind of dynamic timbres instead of just dynamic volumes.